Have you ever wondered why the silence of a woman cuts deeper than her rage? Why the sound of her footsteps fading without a single goodbye echoes longer in your mind than any argument ever could? It is not the words she never said that haunt you. It is the mirror she quietly placed before your soul, before vanishing. In that final moment of stillness, she became not a woman, but a reflection of everything you refused to see in yourself. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the feminine presence within every man's unconscious. When a woman walks away in silence, she doesn't just leave the room. She retreats from the very structure of your psyche. And the collapse that follows? It is not heartbreak. It is ego death. You will try to rationalize it. Tell yourself she was cold, impulsive, too emotional, or too distant. You will project every flaw you fear within yourself onto her. You will replay every interaction, dissecting silences, remembering her gaze, the one that always saw through you. But she didn't leave because she stopped loving you. She left because you stopped hearing her long before she stopped speaking. And when a woman no longer sees herself reflected in your eyes, when her presence becomes invisible in your world, she disappears into her own. Most men don't understand what they lose when a woman like that leaves. Not until much later. Not until years have passed, and no one else has touched them with that same storm-soft power. She was never loud in her worth. She didn't scream her pain or beg to be chosen. She simply was. A force of nature cloaked in tenderness. And when that kind of woman goes quiet, it isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The kind of wisdom earned through years of watching a man remain asleep while she burned her soul just to light his way. She waited, silently. Through your detachment, through your confusion, through the walls you built from childhood wounds and masculine pride. She saw the boy beneath your armor, trembling and unfinished. She reached for him again and again, not with demand, but with patience. But you mistook her grace for permanence. And that was your greatest mistake. Because even the most nurturing woman will stop watering a garden that refuses to grow. And now, her absence has become your shadow. It follows you in new relationships, in the emptiness of every temporary conquest. You search for her in other bodies, in other smiles, but she is nowhere. Because what she gave you was not physical, it was spiritual. A mirror to your soul, a chance to become whole. And when she left, she took that mirror with her. Not out of cruelty, but because she realized you were never going to look. It is a cruel irony of human nature, especially male nature, that only in the void do you feel the weight of what was sacred. Only after her silence do you begin to hear. You remember her presence not in moments of laughter, but in how she sat with your darkness without judgment, how she held space for the parts of you even you didn't understand. She was not just a woman. She was a rite of passage, a confrontation with the self. And so, you mourn, not just her, but the man you could have become in her presence. That is what haunts you, not the loss of her body, but the loss of your becoming. Because deep down, you knew, her love was not comfortable, but it was transformational. She did not come to complete you. She came to awaken you. And when you failed to rise, she did the only thing left. She walked away, without a word, like a ghost with unfinished business. But she is not the ghost. You are, trapped in a memory, haunting the corridors of your own unclaimed potential. And so you walk through life with the invisible weight of her silence draped across your shoulders. The world sees a man intact, functional, perhaps even successful, but inside, something vital is missing. Because the woman who left without a word didn't just exit your life, she punctured the illusion you had of yourself. The illusion that love was something owed to you, that presence was permanent, and that softness would always stay no matter how you neglected it. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Her departure was not random. It was a response from the unconscious, hers and yours. She was the embodiment of your anima, and her vanishing was a psychic event. A rupture, an invitation to look inward, which you refused. You ran from the pain, called it drama, buried it beneath distractions. But no matter how far you run, the image of her walking away, without rage, without farewell, waits for you in the quiet moments. In the midnight hours when the distractions fade and you can hear your soul speak. She is not coming back, not because she doesn't feel, but because she feels too deeply to remain where she is unseen. You mistook her silence for passivity, not realizing it was a final act of mercy. Words can be debated, twisted, ignored. Silence, however, is a verdict. And once a woman like her chooses silence, she has already gone to a place beyond your reach, into herself, into the depths of her own worth, where your validation no longer holds power. This is what most men never grasp. A woman doesn't leave when she's angry. She leaves when she's indifferent. When your presence no longer moves her, when your absence feels lighter than your presence, she quietly dissolves from your life like morning fog. And that is what truly breaks you. Not the drama of a breakup, but the slow, spiritual realization that you were never present enough to be missed. You were never listening. Jung's teachings on individuation speak to this moment. For the masculine to evolve, it must integrate the feminine within. But that integration requires humility, vulnerability, and reverence. She wasn't here to stroke your ego. She was here to dismantle it, to shine a light on your blind spots, to invite you into wholeness. And in return, you asked her to shrink, to be quieter, simpler, easier to manage. You confused her intensity for chaos, her intuition for irrationality, her boundaries for rejection. And now, as you sit with her absence, you are beginning to understand. That ache in your chest? It is not just longing. It is recognition. You are mourning the woman and the self you refused to become in her presence. She didn't want perfection. She wanted your participation, your effort, your soul. But you were too busy performing strength to show her your wounds. Too proud to admit you didn't know how to love her. So now, you wander through life with fragments of her still lodged in your psyche. A scent, a song, a phrase she once whispered in the dark. They rise without warning and leave you gutted. Because what you lost was not just a partner, but a portal, a chance to evolve. She was not your possession. She was your mirror. And when she vanished, so did your reflection. Now all you see is what remains, an ego trying to patch itself together with borrowed confidence and recycled pleasures. But the soul knows the truth. The soul remembers the moment she left, the stillness, the final breath before she stepped beyond the threshold, without slamming the door, because she didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any scream. And you're left with echoes, and shadows, and a heart that beats a little quieter each time you pretend she was just another chapter. Because she wasn't. She was the turning point, the one you were meant to rise for, but didn't. It is a strange kind of grief, the kind that doesn't bleed but burns. Not in the skin, but in the psyche. And it doesn't announce itself in sobs or breakdowns, but in the small, hollow spaces of your day. The way your hand hesitates before texting someone new. The way your chest tightens at the sound of a laugh that almost sounds like hers. It lives in the quiet, in the solitude, in the haunting truth that you let something sacred slip away, and you didn't even realize it until it was gone. Jung would say this is the moment when the shadow emerges, when all the rejected, neglected, disowned parts of yourself rise from the depths to confront you. Her absence is not a punishment. It is a mirror. She has become the ghost that forces you to look at everything you refuse to change. The emotional laziness, the stoic pride mistaken for strength, the fragile masculinity dressed up in dominance. She saw it all, and still, she stayed for a while, until the silence between you became louder than the words you never dared to speak. And now you're learning. Silence is not empty. It's full of all the things you failed to say, all the moments you chose ego over intimacy. And that silence now lives in you. You carry it into every interaction. You bring it into every bedroom. And no matter how beautiful the new face beside you, there is a vacancy in your gaze, because the woman you let walk away without a word took the last piece of your unconscious innocence with her. You may ask, why did she leave like that? Why no explanation, no closure, no final conversation? But that's the part you still don't understand. The closure wasn't hers to give, it was yours to earn. And you didn't. She watched you choose everything but her. She watched you remain loyal to your comfort, your distractions, your fears. She asked for presence. You offered performance. She wanted real. You gave her routine. So when she left, she wasn't abandoning you. She was rescuing herself from the slow erosion of her self-worth. You never heard her because you weren't listening. You were defending, justifying, retreating behind the walls you mistook for masculinity. But true masculinity, the kind rooted in depth and courage, requires the audacity to be soft, the bravery to be still and truly see. She longed for a man who could sit in the fire of her soul without flinching, who could honor her storms without silencing them. But you were afraid of the fire, and so you smothered it. She left, not because she was fragile, but because she was finally strong enough to stop breaking herself to protect you. She learned, through quiet agony, that loving you was costing her the parts of herself she spent years rebuilding. And one day, without warning, something in her shifted. She looked at herself, not in your eyes, but in her own, and realized she deserved more. Not more attention, more truth. And in that sacred recognition, she chose herself. Not in rage, not in vengeance, but in reverence. She walked away as a woman who had returned to her own center. And when a woman reclaims herself, she doesn't announce it. She simply becomes unreachable, not because she is hiding, but because she is healed. And the man who once held her heart becomes a lesson in her evolution, a sacred scar. You may one day find yourself face to face with someone new. She may be lovely, tender, patient, but a part of you will flinch because you know what you're capable of losing. You know what silence sounds like when it's final. And the shadow of that knowledge will follow you until you face it, until you stop blaming her departure and start confronting your reflection. Because the woman who left without a word did not steal your peace. She exposed your emptiness. And until you fill it with presence, purpose, and truth, you will continue to bleed in places no one else can see. There will come a time, perhaps when you're older, perhaps when you're alone in a room filled with everything you've built, when her memory doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm, but like a whisper. Not to torment, but to remind. She was not sent to destroy you. She was sent to awaken you. And the pain you feel is not just the ache of her absence. It's the resistance of your soul against the truth she embodied. She was never trying to be your world. She was asking to be met in hers. But you were too distracted by your own echoes, too bound by your patterns, too afraid of what it might cost to love her fully. And now you know, the cost of not loving her was greater. Because she was the threshold, the passage, the feminine archetype that demanded you evolve or be left behind. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires confrontation with both the shadow and the anima. She was both. She mirrored the feminine you had buried beneath pride. She invited that forgotten tenderness to breathe, to lead, to guide. But your conditioned masculinity refused her offering. You confused domination with power, control with love, stoicism with wisdom. So she became your test. Not a punishment, but a paradox. Someone who loved you so deeply that she refused to let you remain small. And when you chose your defenses over her depth, when you silenced your inner feminine instead of honoring her outer one, she didn't fight. She withdrew. Because she knew that no amount of effort could build a bridge across a chasm you refused to name. You may think you've moved on. You may smile, succeed, seduce. But deep within, the wound remains. Not because she wounded you, but because she revealed the one already there. She didn't create your abandonment wound. She exposed it. She didn't fracture your sense of self. She reflected its incompleteness. She didn't disappear to hurt you. She disappeared to heal. And in that vanishing, she reclaimed her myth. A woman who walks away without a word is not weak. She is a goddess in mourning, mourning the parts of herself she lost trying to reach a man who refused to open. Her silence is her resurrection. Her absence, a ritual. She leaves like the moon, quietly, yet certain she will rise again. Fuller, brighter, untouched by the tides she no longer chases. But you remain at the shore, calling out to a tide that does not return, holding pieces of a story that will never be rewritten, searching the eyes of strangers for a familiarity that will never come again. Because the bond you lost was not ordinary. It was alchemical, sacred, the kind of love that asks everything and gives more, the kind of love that becomes myth once lost. And perhaps, years from now, if you finally silence the noise, lay down the armor, and listen, not to the world, but to yourself, you might hear what she heard all along, the soft, terrified heartbeat of a man not yet whole. And in that moment, you will weep, not for her, but for the version of you that never fully showed up. That is when the healing begins. Not when you forget her, not when you replace her, but when you become the man she once saw glimpses of, the man she believed in before you believed in yourself. not to win her back. She is long gone. But to honor the soul you lost by refusing her presence. Because every woman who leaves without a word is also the woman who once prayed you would speak. Honestly, vulnerably, soulfully. And when you didn't, she didn't punish you. She set you free. Free to face the parts of yourself you buried in silence. Free to confront the emptiness you filled with distractions. Free to finally become a man worthy, not of her return, but of your own becoming. There is a sacred reckoning that comes only after profound loss. Not the loss of possession, but the loss of potential. The realization that you stood in the presence of something timeless and failed to recognize it because you were still governed by the ego's shallow games. She was not perfect, but she was present. And in a world addicted to superficial connection, her presence was a rebellion, a revolution, a quiet, ferocious offering of depth. Now that she's gone, you understand the difference between attention and devotion, between admiration and recognition, between needing a woman and receiving her. Because to receive a woman like her, one who walks between softness and strength like breath between heartbeats, you must be ready to dissolve, to shatter the false self, to burn the masks, to let the anima rise. Jung taught that the unconscious will meet us through projections. The people we love are often messengers of our own hidden nature. She was that messenger. Her voice called out the version of you buried beneath years of avoidance and denial. She knew things you hadn't spoken, felt things you hadn't allowed yourself to feel. She didn't need to explain you. She understood you. But understanding is not the same as tolerating. And love without mutual evolution becomes self-abandonment. She left quietly because she knew loud departures only feed the ego. Her exit wasn't a performance. It was a liberation. Not from you, but from the cycle. The loop of trying to hold space for a man unwilling to hold space for himself. You saw her strength and confused it with permanence. You mistook her patience for passivity. You thought the well would never run dry. And yet, there you stood, one day, cup in hand, and no water left to give. And now, no matter how far you run, she lingers, not as a hope, not as a fantasy, but as a question. What if you had shown up differently? This question lives beneath every relationship you attempt after her. It whispers through the silence when the laughter fades. It echoes in moments when you almost open, almost soften, almost stay, but pull back again. Because she taught you what love could be. And nothing else will ever feel quite whole again. Not until you face what you denied. Your pain is not punishment. It is instruction. The wound is the teacher. And every man who loses a sacred woman must walk this path. Through the wilderness of regret, the furnace of ego death, the valley of self-reflection. Some don't survive it. They drown in avoidance, build a life of empty victories, die surrounded by people who never truly knew them. But some, few, walk through the fire. They learn to listen, to feel, to apologize without excuses, to witness a woman without controlling her, to choose presence over pride, responsibility over resentment, growth over guilt. And these men, they don't forget her, but they forgive themselves. That is the final right, the final breath of healing. To say, I failed her, but I will not fail myself again. To stop chasing the ghost of what was, and begin the long, sacred journey back to the self. She was the mirror, but you must now become the reflection. For no woman, no matter how divine, can complete a man who refuses to complete himself. And when you finally arrive, no longer broken, but rebuilt, there will be peace. Not because you got her back, not because you proved your worth, but because you remembered it. And in that remembrance, you release her. Fully, gently, with gratitude. Because her silence was not a curse. It was a gift. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.